In exercise 5, you'll be working on advanced Photoshop image editing. And we're going to go through several additional techniques for touching up and improving the appearance of digital photographs. And we're going to start by opening up that O5A Start PSD. And the first thing I want to do before I begin, of course, like with all our files, is to save this as a working file. Now that we have it saved, I'm going to go in and I'm going to check my levels through my adjustments panel. So I'm in my layers pop out, and under this icon, I can bring up my levels. So my levels show essentially a histogram. So a histogram displays the range of dark and light values in an image. The black triangle on the left represents the shadows, the white triangle on the right represents the highlights, and a gray triangle represents the midtones. The ideal histogram has its black point at the beginning and the beginning of the data, and its white point at the end of the data. The middle portion should have fairly uniform peaks. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the Calculate a More Accurate Histogram button, which you'll find right here. And once that's done, it disappears. We're now going to drag the black triangle closest to output levels to match up where kind of the darkest colors begin in our image. We're now going to move our white just slightly to left, moving it towards the midtones. So about there looks good. Feel free to play with your sliders and notice how it's going to change your image to begin with. Once you have your histogram set up the way you like, you can exit the properties and save the file. As you can see, Photoshop has created a layers level for you. Our next goal is to start some image editing. So I'm going to zoom in on our model's face, and just to take a look at what we're trying to achieve right now, I want to remove these stray hairs that have swept into her face. We're going to be adjusting the dark kind of makeup that is under her eyes, and we can remove some of these fine lines around the mouth as well. We want to start first by clicking on the background layer and creating a duplicate layer. And I'm going to label this Corrections and press OK. So we're going to start with the Spot Healing Brush. So we've used the Healing Brush tool before, but this time we're going to use a Spot Healing Brush. And I'm going to zoom in to see the hair even better. Now with the Spot Healing Brush, we're going to use a pretty fine size right now. So I'm going to set this at a 7, and I want my hardness to be at 100%. Make sure that your type is selected to be content aware. And you can go ahead now and trace over this hair, and you can see that it's disappearing quite easily. So start by working through this file and removing all of these stray hairs. As I get to the eye, I'm going to make smaller strokes so that I don't create a blur across the iris. Once you're happy with your adjustments, we can move on to removing the fine lines around the mouth. You can work in here. She doesn't have many, so we can flatten those out as well. So once you have the hair removed and the fine lines removed, we're going to work to remove the darker kind of makeup smudges under the eye. And to do this, we're switching our brush just slightly from the Spot Healing tool to the Healing Brush tool. I'm going to come up and I'm going to select a larger pixel size, so 19, and I want my hardness to be at about 50%. Now this tool is going to work a little more similarly to the clone stamp tool we used in exercise 4. So you need to pick up the color. So as you might remember, you have to press Alt, and that's going to give you that target. And we want to pick colors that are close to our skin tone and that help us blend in and around the eye. So work slowly to make these adjustments. And you might, again, want to play with the size of your brush. To help you get a good blend. Always check what you're grabbing and make sure you're not picking up something that's maybe too rosy tone from her cheeks or anything that's too dark like the existing makeup. As you saw in the previous tutorial with the wooden backdrop, the wooden wall, I like to use a mixture of size selection, and I feel this allows me to get the most kind of accurate blending as possible. Make sure you consistently pick up new color so we don't go from suddenly light to dark or dark to light. Once you're happy, I always suggest zooming out so that you can just be sure that you're making the right adjustments and they look good in the overall picture. Also, make sure that you save. We're now going to enhance the image with the Dodge and the sponge tool. And you'll remember the sponge tool from the previous exercise when we used it to make the child's tie more vibrant. This time we're starting with our Dodge tool. And we're going to set the following options. So we want our brush size set for a 65. And we want our exposure set at 30%. We want our range to be selected for midtones. We're now going to brush the Dodge tool under the eye to lighten them even more. So you see the difference? It's now bringing out those midtones even greater. And if you feel like you've done that too much, as always, you can open up that history panel and back up a few steps. Seems that 1 or 2 brushes is going to be the most effective. You don't want to lighten under the eye too much. You can also play with the exposure percentage, maybe using a lighter exposure to just getting it a little lighter without going overboard. And again, we want to save. We're now going to select the sponge tool, which we know is hidden under the Dodge tool. And for these options, we want this set at 35 pixels. We want our brush hardness to be at 0. We are going to be working under saturation mode. Our flow, we can set for 50%, and we want to make sure this vibrance box is checked. We're now going to move our sponge tool over the irises, the colored part of the eyes, to increase the saturation. So we're bringing out her eye color with each pass. And again, zooming out to make sure that you're happy with your decisions. And save again. We're now going to select the Dodge tool again. And this time we're selecting shadows from that range menu instead of midtones. And we're going to use the tool to lighten up the eyeshadow area above the eyes. So lightening this up further, zooming in and out. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller to get in here. And we are addressing, again, the shadows versus the midtones like last time. So with each stroke, we can lighten this up even further. And you guys now know that I have a dog. Now that he has settled down, you are ready for the final step. So before you go ahead and save for the last time, I want you just to zoom out and check that you're happy with the adjustments to her face. Once you're satisfied, you can always go back in and make something darker or lighter. You can save this as a final file, so O5A final PSD, and as well, make sure you save that as a JPEG and upload both of them to Canvas.